first of all, I'd kind of like to know what's your interest, maybe person by person, one or two sentences. Why were you interested to come to this session? Stan.
Yeah. I think business and ministry can be and should be very much interconnected. And we are operating in the Czech Republic where people don't understand church really, don't care for church, but they understand business, they understand, stuff like that, secular stuff. So we're always trying to come up with ideas how to blend these two and how to use business to preach the gospel or how to advise.
That was a good statement because you already hit a couple of trigger words for me.
Okay.
We'll get back to that.
So I'm very interested.
Julie?
Because I think there's a connection. Just because you're in business does not mean that you're not in ministry or you have to pick one or the other. It does work out in there. And so you have a better understanding how the treatment land and how you can utilize business skills to reach the people that the church didn't reach, but you can here in the Jesus.
All right. These guys are teaching my lessons.
One is I think people don't like to see ministry as a business, but bottom line, it really is a business. Is how you treat that business, and in the marketplace to bring people to your business, how you reach those that need to come to church. So there's different aspects of that.
Follow.
You used to stop away in the road.
All right. You're cutting out on me. All right. I'm already weeding out the crowd.
Already going down. No, I've been progressively networking with people working, doing the missions that were in the nation, both in Europe, and I just came back to an Africa, Middle East, South America. Just more and more, not only business leaders, but emerging leaders that are wanting to understand their place and their purpose in terms of kingdom work, and then call it God. And I've just constantly pushed in the face of these guys. I just want to be better equipped to help them identify who they are and make sure they
Excellent. Michael.
Yeah. So for me, I need to be able to talk to business leaders, rich guys, about how they can partner with what God's doing in the kingdom in a way that's not offensive. People get weird about money.
Yep.
The church I'm on staff with is quite large, and large churches have a bad reputation about use of finances that people are already kind of leery. But the Bible's clear. There is a spiritual gift of giving. And for people that have that, I want to be able to connect them, I guess, to kingdom purpose. And they could be based on what else can do.
So they have to participate just like everyone else. This might move better.
One of the primary acknowledgments of any kind of marketplace ministry conversation is that the church and the business community, by and large, speak different languages, and they don't know how to communicate. And so we're not going to be able to talk a lot about that aspect of it today, but that's when we talk about business's mission, we're going to talk about it in two spaces. So I'm condensing a lot of material into a little thing today. If you want to have further conversations, throughout the conference, I'd be glad to sit down with you somewhere and have talks or whatever. But I'm pushing two things together today. We called this business as mission, business for mission. What are my credentials for that? Not a lot, except that I have studied it for a long time. I have been a practitioner of it to some degree over years. I did serve, if you're familiar with the Luzon World Mission Council, I was a part of the business as mission preparations for that in Cape Town some years ago. So I do have experience in it, and I've done auditing of projects and things like that. So I'm just saying that because I want you to know I'm not just speaking out of nowhere, because a lot of us as preachers know we can learn content real quick and distribute it. But I do want to push through these things fairly quickly. So I'm going to start here. Everybody has heard, let me preface that with the business as mission part is probably going to relate to those that are involved more in local church. And a big part of that is learning how to involve your business people and your other marketplace people. We have our first WE marketplace minister in the room with us today. We want to learn how to bring the people of the marketplace more into the ministry of the church and help them understand that they are the ministry of the church. We want to break down this idea that the church is in this building. We all know it. It's not a building, it's not an organization, it's the people. And if that's the truth, then those people are the church wherever they go. And we want to make that, very, very well known and recognize their gifts into what we do as the corporate gathering as well, who we are as the organization or as, our local body and community. So the business as mission part would relate a little more to the local church. The business for mission kind of takes those principles into the mission field to understand how those things can work together. But I think everything I'm going to say today relates both to the local and to the international missional, and I want us to think of it that way. We've all heard the saying, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, right? Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. I like to take that one step further and say, teach him to run a fleet of fishing boats and he'll transform a community. So we want to see how these things work together. So some of this is a relatively new concept for some churches. It's been BAM, Business as Mission, has been around for decades now, but it's still just gaining traction in a lot of places. But we want to know, what is this? It stems from the fact that God is the original entrepreneur. He created good things in the physical arena. He told Adam and Eve to be involved in business. He gave them enterprise, till the gardens, take care of this place, expand it, help it grow. It was a value-added process that He placed into our creation from day one. We were made to work. It's in our nature. So business, we know, is about creating products and services in the physical arena and being involved in that value-added process. The difference for us is that we're going to view that not just in the natural of adding value to community, adding value to society, adding value to families, but we're adding value to the kingdom as it expands into those areas. Everyone on the planet relates to business in some way. You're either in it doing it or you're dependent on it. We went through all the supply line problems these past years, and we all know how dependent we are on the businesses of the world to get things right. Business has a very strong transformational powers. I've learned you can do a lot more through the marketplace by getting out into the marketplace. And marketplace biblically, last year at the conference we talked about this. The marketplace wasn't just a place of business. The agora in the Bible was the place of education, the place of government, the place of physical training in school and in gymnastics. It was the heart of everything communal. And so it's getting into the marketplace that has to become the most relevant thing. I can trace you through the book of Acts and show you that almost everything that happened supernaturally in the book of Acts did not take place in a church meeting. It took place in the market. And yet we have tried to take the marketplace and draw it into the building and into the community. And we've been thinking about this backward. I often relate it to, we know we're the salt of the earth, but we're not out there trying to put salt on things. We're trying to shove the meat into the salt shaker. And we've got to reverse that kind of mentality. So the BAM concept, what is business as mission? And I'm just going to keep saying BAM, and you'll get, if that's not already in your vocabulary, it would be. It's holistic in nature. It's believing of the fact that God has the power to transform people and communities, spiritually, economically, socially, and environmentally. And this is part of that communication process that Michael was talking about with business people. they understand what it means when you start talking about making transformation through business. But if we're just talking to them in Bible verses and in the kind of discipleship teachings that we've always been oriented to, that's not the way that it makes sense to them. But when you start talking to them about the way that their business can be a transformational element in their community, and help them understand how that process can take place, help them understand that those in business are not less in ministry than those standing in pulpits. It's just different ministry. So when we start talking about this to people, we say, well, really, business has, perhaps more than anything else, business has the capacity to be transformational in communities and societies almost more than anything else. And we would like to say that the local church is the hope, and that's true. But again, only in the aspect that the people are the church. And if we're not training them to understand that and to go out in the knowledge and the power and the excitement and the encouragement of that, and we're just trying to get them, to our business meetings at church so they can understand what the needs are and help us fulfill them, then we're moving the wrong direction. BAM is holistic and it is transformational. So it's a paradigm shifter. It's really as simple as this. So those who have been involved in business, most businesses look at at least three bottom lines. You want to know what your economical impact is. How successful have we been? If you're a good business, you probably want to measure what your social impact is. How have we helped the homeless in our community? How have we helped food banks? How have we helped good governance? Whatever it is that the company takes a hold of. And good companies will ask, what is our environmental impact? And as Christians, we should be asking that. We are the first ones given stewardship of the earth. And so we ask those three lines, but business as mission, and it's different to be a minister in business or a Christian. What makes a Christian business? Any Christian can be a businessman, but that doesn't make their business Christian. Because it's about what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how intentional you are about it. So we say for a business to be missional, to be kingdom, to be impactful, you add that fourth bottom line. What is our spiritual impact? What impact are we making on our employees? Now, maybe we can't preach to them every day, but there are ways for us to communicate to them, for them to know our faith. You look at something like a Chick-fil-A, who some would say even have some very amoral stances within their company these days. And yet you can also look at them and see they have some of the most powerful programs for marriage retreats and healing, for children's training, for different things, because they're intentional about measuring how are we helping our people become better, in their faith, if that's who they are and that's where we can get them, but even if not that, how are we encouraging them with the biblical principles that impact their lives, whether they know it or not? And so we measure our spiritual impact. Talking about accountability, we add a top line because most companies will say, well, we're accountable to our shareholders, we're accountable to our stakeholders in society. We measure those things, find out how we're impacting that, what the attitudes are and things like that. But then we add the accountability level of the body of Christ. That I am submitting myself to leadership and coaching and peer relationships and things within the church that help me to proceed in these accountable things. And so a Christian business that is missional, will add these measurements intentionally, impactfully. So I have two questions that we can't spend a lot of time on here at the minute, but I would have you think them through, and maybe we'll get a response or two. But these are my questions. This is where I came from when I got into this. Is the church attempting to be a group of people who have all the answers to questions that no one is asking? That's the, how do I talk to my business people, or people in my country don't understand what this is about. It's not a language they understand. It's not a concept. And so we're coming out and saying, okay, pass out our flyers, we're starting a new church, come and learn, about this, and this. And we start out by trying to answer the questions that nobody who's getting that flyer at their house is even asking. And so we've already missed the mark from day one. And in missional aspect, international ministry or cross-cultural ministry, even here in America, the danger in that is that you're already inviting them into something that they have to reject from day one because they already think it's a heresy, or they think it's a cult, or they think it's some weird thing you're trying to trap them into. And so you've started at a place that is almost a non-starter, especially in our communities today. So are we trying to answer all the questions that no one is asking? And if that's true, how do we change the questions so that we start asking the right ones? And two is Christian-sponsored help. This can be aid. This can be the food banks that we do. This can be all of the projects we have. Helping refugees. In all the ways that we do help in the world, are we addressing symptoms instead of root causes? Are we providing services that are neither reproducible nor sustainable? And that's where transformational business or business as mission comes in, because it starts to ask the questions, how do we do this in such a way? It doesn't say stop the help. I do a lot of work with helping refugees. I'm not going to stop doing that because the immediate needs are present. Somebody's hungry, Jesus said, give them food. If they need shelter, give them shelter. They need clothes, give them clothes. But am I going to have to keep doing that for the next 35 years of their lives if I'm not thinking about what goes beyond that? And that's true in your community. If all we're doing is helping sustain that which will always need to be sustained, and it should be done, but somebody has to be strategizing about next steps. How do we get this into sustainable environments? And that's the kind of stuff that business people want to talk about. That's what they want to be at the table for. They don't want to come every time and have you say, we need $50,000 to feed these people for the next 3 months. Mm-hmm. They might be fine with that. But if they're got good business minds, they're going to very quickly start asking you, what are you doing to help these people get past this point? Because if I left my company at this stage forever, it would die. It can't be sustained. And that's what we need them for. We need them to push those buttons. Hopefully gently, but sometimes uncomfortably. Because that's the value that they add. That's what God has placed into them. That's the way that they're wired. So I want to talk about two different things about how to view business as mission. Number one, business as entry. That is, how do I get into a community to start making a difference? I've always used this example. I work a lot in Morocco. I cannot go into a Moroccan village and go to the head man, what we would call the mayor or whatever, and say, you know what, I want to come into your village and start a church. What do you think about that? You're going to say, go ahead, and we're going to kill anybody you convert, and then we'll probably take you out too. Right? But if I come into that same community and say, I want to have a meeting with you. I want to start a small business. It's probably going to employ 3 to 5 people in the beginning. Here's what we're going to try to do, while hoping it will expand and that it will bring benefit to your community. You know what his answer is going to be? I'll cut the ribbon. We started an orphanage in Morocco many years ago, and we made it inherent in the program from day one that, number one, we weren't going to bring teams over to build everything. We were going to hire local workers to do the work. They do it cheaper. They know the materials that they use, and they need the work. And then we said, those that get employed on the site, mothers taking care of children or homes or whatever, that kind of stuff, that we're going to help them with programs like, here's a program that you can start saving and we'll help do some of it with you, and you'll be able eventually to buy your own home. or you'll be able to sustain your children whether your husband has left you or not. And those kinds of things started to ingratiate the place to the local communities. It gave open doors that could never have been done otherwise. And the same is true here locally in the U.S. If I was pastoring a church in the U.S., I think one of the first things I would want to think about is in all the areas of marketplace, who do we have in the church that can become what I would biblically call an apostle, but let's take that language out and just say become a coach to the business community. Who do we have in education that can become a coach to the educational community? Who can we have in arts that can become a coach to the artistic community? How can we help that process? How can we train not just how to understand the book of Revelations, but how can we train people to go into the communities and affect these areas? I had a pastor friend, he's still a friend, he's not pastoring anymore. But when he was, his church was a part of a program with Willow Creek that measured the volunteerism in your local church. They scored off the charts. Fairly sizable church, about 800 people in a community of 1,000 people. That's a pretty good win rate. 80% of the regular attenders in their church were active volunteers in ministry somewhere in the church. 80%. If you get 20%, you're doing well. And so we're having this conversation, and he's talking about how amazed he is. And now he's got this staff, and they've got all these volunteers. And so I challenged him. It was just a thought, but he put it into action, and it actually worked. So what if you've got all these volunteers, why is your children's pastor spending all her time building curriculum and taking care of the pastoral care of their team? What if you paid that person to be out in the school system every day, meeting with teachers, kids, families, and their job was actually out there and not in here? Your youth leader, your worship pastor. What if rather than having to train the team every week, he was in a local community center doing something else, teaching and it grew their church significantly in the process. But he had a particular circumstance that very few people are ever going to have. But it's indicative of the process of thinking, how do we push this out into the community? And if we stop speaking the language of always trying to draw in, let me get you in here to do this, and we start speaking the language of let's enter the community, you can enter strong. If you're at the mayor's office saying, how can we bless this community? It's going to be much more interested to have you around than if you're just holding church on Sunday and clogging up the streets on, when church gets out, and not paying any taxes for the water system or the electrical grid. Or sometimes we don't think about the benefits that we get in the U.S. If you're a big enough church, you got free police outside directing traffic and making sure the place is clean. And we're 501c3. We don't pay any taxes for that. It's no wonder communities start looking at us and go, come on. You put more weight on our structural system than anything else does. Unless you got a trucking community. But we don't speak the language. And we're very quick to take the benefits without ever thinking, how do we give that back? But businesses, schools, governments, they understand that. And yes, they take advantage of us. But my answer to that, it's more often than not, so what? Let them take the advantage they can take. We can be wise as serpents and harmless as doves and get the job done. So business is entry. Think of it as getting the people into the community, starting to make a difference, and then business as transformational. And I already talked about this a little bit, but you brought up the word secular, which I use a lot too. I'm trying to get it out of my vocabulary, because I say this: God created everything. There is no such thing as sacred and secular. There is sacred and sinful. Because it was created, and if it's not right, It's just a corruption of that thing, and it's sin. So there's not church things and world things. There's sacred and sinful. So whether we're in the church or out in the business, if I'm a Christian operating a business and I'm cheating on my taxes and mistreating my suppliers and all that kind of stuff, that's not my that's not my secular activity. It's sinful. So I'm trying to get that vocabulary out of my system because it gives us this idea that this is this and that is that. And it's not. That's not biblical. We know it logically. But we have to start thinking of what we do, and in this context, this classroom, about business in particular, thinking of it as transformational. How am I transforming myself, my people at work, my community, and the world around me? And it can become that. Now I want to play you a quick, I don't know if we have volume on this thing, so I don't know if I can play it. But I wanted to give you a video from just 2 projects that we're doing presently.
Kissing with North Africa, the second I'm doing it. I'm greeting you today from this place where everybody's getting ready for a mangkotasi, where on multi with God the Allah goes something. But we, as a believer, we thank God that for this season we're getting ready to serve the cultural service, and the Salted Cafe is a blessing to all of us because as a church that is an underground church that doesn't have a space where we can meet daily. Oh, we need to know holy, and we don't organic people that need things. You got the fucking yeah, what is in how small because you can't break. But when you get it also kept it, we will have those made that you set up by a song. Isn't like it take the at very obvious of in the knee. Allow it take the be cookie, but we care tea. Or can I what thou lick it be iron. But our cat, they are mad devout. I want to be able to have the free workshop. But our young people would build for why. Even if you school, we did not be the artist, the city, the keeper. And even an top day, do art adding. And that's how you do your factor. It's a very big solution to get factor that you get visiting. Not only will divide freedom. Not only that, you take the illegal hold the table, help out the duty. When so far, but the plane very deep at the box vibration and another on that Saudi or that and they can get it there. And they were happy there to get there. The same in Pover, tired about it, already after the cookie. You need no faith, only body. People want the digging and then go to Cathedral to begin for many more that. Thank you for listening to the hello. Okay, for I get it. The big and see. You are right. Wait, okay. Yeah, okay. Love the doctor. We are the doctor of the boy. Get tired, happy birthday. Or really make that eat that and it's like that. Wait, just that time we have to.
So this is not a pitch for our ministry. This was just to show a couple of examples. The first one, I had to cover the volume because it can't be shared. So the first one is in a closed country, and we've enlisted a small group of young people to do these cultural cafes. So it'll be a coffee shop, but it has training centers attached to it, very artistic, very well done, with that goal of getting people into those programs, but making it a community transformation center. Our goal, God helping, is that we would be able to do this in at least 10 cities of significance, not capital cities, but places that others don't generally go, but are centers of importance. The second one that was talking about being at it's actually the largest, what's the word? They do them at trade centers. Anyway, it was a gathering of vendors for hotels, restaurants, and coffee shops. And so we've started a business in Greece that employs women who have been rescued out of trafficking situations. And they're making, I actually have one with me I was going to wear, but I forgot to take it out of its packaging, and it's all terribly wrinkled and not looking well. But they're making very quality, high-end things. In fact, we just got a contract with somebody building a €6 million villa on the island of Corfu that they're going to fit out entirely with our products. We've done now a couple of boutique hotels and things like that. But it's helping these women who are in a situation of needing immediate help, but then putting them through training, both life skills and job, and then getting those that pass to a certain level, trying to get them employed, and then not just employed, but employed and paid enough to have a living wage. Because a lot of these types of programs, sometimes, it's tongue in cheek, so I'm not condemning anybody, but for me, it's sometimes like we use them as Christian sweatshops. We're getting a lot of real cheap labor to do some stuff. And I think our goal always has to be the dignity of the person. And so we've got to at least strive to the point that we're doing something of excellence, but that measures itself against a few things. And what time is it? I don't wear a watch anymore. Okay, so we're supposed to be done at 12:15, right? Okay.
Can you elaborate on community transformation centers?
So just what my friend here was saying, that it will be a space to bring particularly young people in and teach them life skills, but also have programs, especially artistic programs. Music and art are a big deal in this country, and so it will be a space for Christians in those industries to meet and train. We're going to have a pottery class by a world-class potter, and just things like that will bring people into a space that they understand, they can communicate in, and then through relationship, you can begin to build that out into building out the faith community. And so, and then as well, it'll be a place that on certain days it could be closed for personal purposes and used for gatherings for the community of believers. So
if you were a church or business, would they look any different if you were sponsoring?
Well, number one, there's, with a few exceptions, it's illegal to have visible, noticeable churches. So,
No, if you were a church who was anti a transformation center versus a business who was planting, would it or should it?
no, that's what we're going to get to with some of these principles. But that's a great question. So, why? All businesses concerned about profit. Should be. Kingdom business is also concerned about profit, or at least should be. But we add to that we're concerned more about the purpose. So, I would say this, if I'm starting just any old business, I'm going to put out my business plan. I'm probably not going to give it as much grace to get to the point of profitability as I might something like a kingdom enterprise. Maybe. But beyond that, there would be very, very little difference, because we're going to keep that underlying need for profit, but add to it the purpose, the intentionality. What is it that we're going after? So why do we think about business in local or cross or multicultural mission? And how do we think about it? Number one, we have to remember God's purpose in BAM is profitability. He's interested in the production of wealth. It's where He began the creation, and He is still concerned about it today. And we usually, in these presentations, I'll address this last because I don't like to make it a main point. But I think, especially in church environments, we have to begin to think more consistently this way. Profit is an emotive word, right? It elicits negative comment. However, what is objectionable about profit, per se, is not profit, it's greed. So, and sometimes, I think I've been in pastors' meetings or leadership meetings where you had mostly ministry-type people and then maybe one or two business people. They're hearing, this is an example of how they're hearing different words. A lot of us in the more church leadership community, when we start hearing words like profit, we kind of cringe a little bit. But these guys are thinking, well, that's why I live, is to make a profit. Profit's not the problem. Greed is, right? We all preach it. It's not money that is the root of all evil. It's the love of money that is the root of all evil. So, we have to move past that. There are antidotes given to us both in the Old Testament and then fulfilled and revealed to us in the New Testament that handle these things. We don't have time to go through all that Bible study, but you know those principles. There's two reasons that profit is important. First, business appears to be uniquely well situated to work the fields. I've made that clear already. Number two, it's essential to cause the land to be fruitful and to fill the earth, which is our command. What we might in modern practice refer to as to create wealth. I do believe God wants His kingdom people to create wealth. And by the way, we like that scripture said the wealth of the heathen is stored up for the righteous. I just always question people, well, how do you think it's going to get there? It's just going to fall from the sky one day because God went to every evil person's house and gathered up the money and brought it over to our church and said, here, now it's yours. No, it's going to be transfer of wealth. I happen to believe that the greatest end-time revival will probably be financed by Middle Eastern oil money. I think God's storing it up for a purpose. I might be wrong, but at least I like to think that and pray it. Second, business is the dominant institution, not the only one, but the dominant institution equipped to provide organized opportunities, listen to this, organized opportunities for meaningful and creative work that people are created to do. So business moves people into their created purpose. I think that's important. Second principle, intentionality. An important barrier to the role of business, as we just identified, is that sacred secular divide. Monday, or the Sunday-Monday syndrome. Although the divide is now widely recognized, what's the remedy? I think a good part of it could be to let the world see evidence of the Holy Spirit at work in business, through the business community. This is why it's important for us to get into the churches and help these people recognize their role in the kingdom, not just in the society. God puts you here, there, in that thing, not just to do well for your family, your community, your society, but for the kingdom. It takes them down that road where we're saying, yeah, we do need your money. It'd be a lie to say anything different. But it's going to be a whole lot easier for them to release that into that if they understand the intentionality of that purpose and don't feel like they're just being asked for a shakedown. Yeah. A recognition, again, that your place in ministry, I'm in WE, so I'm going to keep myself good, but I happen to believe that all of the gifts in the church are evident in the marketplace. and we should be exercising them that way. Now, you may not be an apostle, as Ephesians would speak of it, but there are apostles to every area of the community life, and we have to recognize that. There are teachers, there are pastors of those areas, and so it's not just it's a recognition of co-equality. Different roles. I still believe in the structure of the church and in how we understand God has given it to us. I believe in accountability to those over us in the Lord. I would never dismiss the need. I think anywhere that church can gather, it should. Not just should, it must. If for no other reason, that it's a tremendous disservice to the rest of the world that can't do that and want to, if we refuse to do it and have every opportunity. That's just unfair. It's ungodly. It creates a dichotomy in the kingdom that makes no sense. So we have to have intentionality. We have to degrade that Monday-Sunday divide. Number 3, focus. The creation mandate is foundational. And the redemption of all creation, biblically, we're told, is God's desire. He's not just redeeming people. He's redeeming the earth. Jesus was a servant, right? He served His Father and He served humanity. Serving people, therefore, should be a characteristic of all of our business. That mindset, I'm not just providing a product, I am serving a people. This is my God-given mandate. All business does this in a sense, but by the primary means of delivering material blessing to people. And not just that, business can also be best suited or best positioned to help address the issues of social injustice. There are ways that we can do that with our activities in that creation of wealth and positioning of people that we really can't do any other way. So we get back to that diagram. The more we get into understanding the 4th line here and the 3rd line up there, the closer we get to holistic transformation of individuals and societies, meeting our mandated bottom line. Next, concern. God loves all of His creation. BAM facilitates the expression of both the salvific motivation, we want people to get saved. So we're going to start cultural cafes in this given country. The goal is not just to give the community a nice place to learn great things. At the end of the day, we're intentional about the fact that we want to see people come to faith in Jesus Christ. It's an intentional end goal. Sure.
When going to a close country and you're starting a cafe that you offer in the country under how do you do that?
It varies. Yeah.
Do you not always do it under
No, we don't do anything in a nation other than Greece under our ministry name. It's all done with recognized partners. So we've spent years getting to know somebody before we ever invest anything in them. Just spending time visiting, maybe doing some, little things together, whatever. But once you know that you've got people you can trust, then it's a matter of determining what's the best way to do this. So in that particular case, we set up a consulting company in the nation that in their charter has the right to do these things. And so it's operated through that. But at the same time, we're setting up a charitable organization in that country that it would probably eventually shift over to. But it's not charity like we understand it. It's social enterprise. It's a business community partnership. So that's the way we would do that there. Other places, it might just be set up a whole nother association maybe even a religious association where it's possible. But so yeah, I mean, dealing with governments these days is a whole different thing.
Are you ever able to get into someone with the SB, assist them on their process of doing that in the medical?
Yeah, probably, depending on the country. But it's also a changing environment right now. So for like example, I'm the president of a international NGO based out of Sweden that has operated an office in Tunisia for 50 years. And it was the most established, really Christian missional ministry in the entire region. And we just walked the organization through the closure of that office and eliminating all the assets, and because the government has come in very, very hard on all associations, not just religious ones. But
And have you made, you should want to ask them that question.
Oh.
Could you want your contact information on the video?
yeah, and it's all on the last slide as well. But let me just finish with this last one. So I made that point. We're very intentional about the fact that our end result in whatever, whether that's replacing refugees or, we're not just giving people water and blankets, we're leading them to faith. That's important to us. Now, how you communicate that, when, and they'll say, that varies. But the salvific mission, if we're Christian businesses, that's got to be fundamentally part of the purpose. Now, like I said, maybe I can't preach to my employees on the factory floor every day, but I can probably be at dinners with some of them, or I can have encounters in different places where I'm going to be intentional about them understanding what my faith is and how I would like them to experience that themselves. So I don't believe in any, whether it's open country, closed country, or any enterprise, I don't believe in a Christian missional activity that does not have that as a part of its fundamental mission. They exist, they can do their work. That's not going to be my partnership. But we also have to understand that there's the motivation too of what I'm calling social justice. That has a little bit of a different connotation in the U.S., so forgive me. But it is helping the marginalized. It is helping those who can't help themselves. It is about making sure that we're not participating in the continued spread of the distance in wealth disparity. It's understanding that we are of an enterprise that Paul walked into Corinth where they were divided by everything, gender, race, wealth, everything you can think about divided them. And he walked in and said, I don't care if you're the slave or the slave owner. I don't care if you're the man or the woman. I don't care what your wealth level is. I don't care what your race is, because they were from many different places. We're not going to have certain people sitting up here and others sitting at their feet. That's not who we are. When we come to the table of Christ, and we can't say that if in our daily practice we're pushing it the other way. That's called hypocrisy. And the Christian business world has got to get into a space where it starts thinking like this. One of my favorite examples is Hobby Lobby. The Green family with Hobby Lobby. They are tremendous. I mean, they're very wealthy, but they are tremendous advocates of doing amazing things globally to make sure that they're not part of that problem. And we've got to have a lot of other people, whether it's local, it's nationally, or it's globally in enterprise. If you are a believer in Christ, our Christian business leaders have to be taught we can't be a part of that process. We want to be profitable, we want to create wealth, but we also want to make sure that we are not furthering the ills of society in the process. And those conversations are very rarely had. I think you know already. But I think I've encountered a lot of business people that when they are challenged with that, it doesn't take them long to go, Might take them longer to adjust their practices, but everything begins with a thought, right? And so we have to start teaching that. So these are the things that for me, if you ask me if it was just a business that had no relationship to church at all, or to would I treat them differently? Only in what those bottom lines are. And most of them are the same. I just add to it what is the kingdom impact in what we're doing. And I don't want to go into that one. We use, in our community, we use this phrase a lot. We want the whole church taking the whole gospel to the whole world. And we have all heard and know the gospel is not just the gospel of salvation, it is the gospel of the kingdom. And we want that whole gospel to go out. The marketplace has to be affected in every regard through our activities, because that's who we are as the church. So my last two questions. Why is business as mission so underrepresented in what we call spirit-empowered? Language used to be spirit-filled, spirit-baptized, charismatic, whatever you want to say. I wonder why it's so underrepresented in spirit-empowered churches and missions. Most of those that I deal with in this realm come from much more traditional streams. And there's a lot of historical, theological reasons for that. But I'm just trying to challenge our thoughts in this community. Why is it so underrepresented in the spirit-empowered community? And I think we heard that touched on this morning. It's because we've made everything about proclamation. My friend on the video said, we believe that we show the gospel, live the gospel before we preach the gospel. It's important. But the other side of that with a lot of my dear friends is show the gospel, but also preach the gospel. We all heard the famous saying, right? You preach the gospel, and if you must, use words. Right? Okay? That's great. But in our church we say, preach the gospel, if you must, use words, but also use words. Let the world see your good deeds, the scripture says, and glorify your Father in heaven. How are you going to glorify the Father in heaven if they have no idea why you're doing what you're doing? Yeah. So you have to make it intentional. You have to make it proclamational. You have to be wise in how you do that. School teachers are losing their jobs if they're not careful about how they do that. People are getting kicked out of communities if they're not careful about how they do that. God has given us the gifts of discernment to be wise in how we do things, but we must do them, and sometimes at cost. One of the big things in business as mission or business for mission, didn't get into a lot of that, but I believe a lot of our missional activity should be shifting from what I call giving to missions to investing in missions. Start investing in things that become sustainable, because it's going to help them in the long run a whole lot more than the gifts that come occasionally or even regularly or whatever else. We've created systems of dependence, and sometimes things have to be dependent. There are people who depend on me to provide for them, just like there are people who depend on you to provide for them. And sometimes you have to respond to dependence, but there has to be the aspect of asking what's next. And if that gets solved, then move on to the next thing and do it all over again. But we've stuck ourselves into a system. We've already heard it in a couple things while we've been here. The competition for money in missional activity is huge and always growing. And for whatever reason, the pool of funds is shrinking. A lot of that has to do with a generational transfer, because I consult a couple of major mission organizations that are dying out because they were funded by legacy gifts. People died and left money to the organization, left estates, left farms, and now people are dying and their kids are finding ways to say, we're not letting that go. And we've got lawyers that can find a way to close that door. So things like legacy gifts are dramatically shrinking. We want our churches to grow younger. That's great. Young people don't have money. And we're experiencing that in some places. So some churches were dying out of the giving end. Other churches were filling in. I was talking to some pastors yesterday. So I've got a friend in the UK with what is the fastest growing church in the UK. They're planting campuses everywhere, which means, they've grown by thousands in the last few years. The problem with that is they've got all this new ministry to expend, but the people coming into those environments don't have the money to give to allow it. So you've taken this and spread it out far and wide, and it's a problem. And we're seeing these patterns. But I think it's in part because we're not thinking in the right terms. And we're not going to, barring the Lord's return, we're not going to fix that in a generation either. But it has to begin somewhere. And so, my 2 cents, business as mission, converting that over into business for mission. And not just the money aspect, but if I've got a real estate guy who's been really effective in the U.S. and loves the Lord, why would I not want him investing in and then coaching a young investor in another country who's building things up for the kingdom there, doesn't have the experience, doesn't have the same level of relationship with the Lord, and can fully benefit from that? But when we organize our mission trips, we're going to organize it to go paint some buildings, build a roof, do a children's campaign, pray through the community. But rarely have I ever had anybody say, well, I've got these nurses in our church. How difficult would it be to organize something within the medical community in another nation and do something for free that blesses that? One example, and I got to be about finished, right? Yes, I'm 1 minute over. Okay, this is the last thing then. We started a leadership program in Egypt with the Anglican diocese. They wanted us to train their departmental leaders in just servant leadership models. We started there, but the Archbishop of the diocese had a good, strong relationship with the first lieutenant, the second in command of the president of the country. He learned of the program, looked through the materials, it's all Bible-based. Looked through the materials and came to us. This never happened because it was right when COVID hit, and then COVID wiped out the project. But he had asked us to do a contract with the government to bring, they have 100 provinces in Egypt. So we want to bring you 100 of our rural development directors once a year for however long it takes to do the program. And we want you to train them. Why? Because he saw it was a good program that was having really good effect where it was being used, and it was being offered in a way that the government didn't have to pay a ton of money to have X university or X corporation of consultants to come in and do it. And it opened a door like that. These things do happen. And our marketplace people understand that value, right? Because they're thinking, what is the return on investment? What's the value we're bringing, and what does that bring back? They have to be taught what return on investment means, because they probably have a different mindset about that. But in all areas, we have people sitting in our churches who have the capacity to impact so much if we would think about it that way. So I don't have time for more questions, I'm sorry, but like I said, you can catch me around if you want to talk a little bit more. I hope this was profitable to you. I don't know if it can be seen on the video. So my email address is up here. I also have a WE address, but I think it's pretty underutilized. But it's just info@ememin.org. So, don't feed a man a piece of fish. Don't just teach him to fish. Let's teach him to run a fleet of fishing boats and see what we can do for the kingdom of God. Amen. God bless you guys.